Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Hello, dear listener. Today we have a special show on Reincarnation and You. We need to think about ourselves as spiritual beings who are called for tasks to be fulfilled, lessons to be learned, and much more than that. For the major task of our lives, we could say, is to work on ourselves and our relationships. Life is all about relationships, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Reincarnation and us, the underpinnings of reincarnating. As Kardec said, to be born, to die, to be reborn yet again, and constantly progress. That last part of the phrase is the key part of it. We are progressing. We never regress. We don't go back living in the bodies of animals. We are here to progress. How often do we think about it? When we face challenges in life, do we recall the fact that we are here to learn something new and to progress? Are we ready to the new? Oftentimes, we're scared of the new. We have this fear of the unknown, and reincarnation may be unknown to you. So we have the honor to have amongst ourselves here in the show today, Carol Bowman. She's an adorable heart and a very bright, courageous mind. She is an internationally known author, lecturer, counselor, past life regression therapist, and pioneer in reincarnation studies. Her first two books, Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven, are now classics in the reincarnation field and have been published and read about around the world in more than 16 foreign languages. She has been practicing past life regression therapist for adults for almost 2 decades, and she studied with the pioneers in the field of past life regression and holds a master's degree in counseling from Villanova University. She has been in TV and radio programs such as the Oprah, Good Morning America, Unsolved Mysteries, A&E, Discovery Channel, ABC Primetime, BBC in England, and on the Art Bell Show. She has been lecturing in several different countries, and including in the United States at the Omega Institute and Edgar Cayce Foundation. She is a pioneering author, and she has a lot to share with us. For the Spiritist community, in 2009, she joined forces with us. She was the keynote speaker of the 3rd U.S. Spiritist Symposium in Boston, Massachusetts. It was a phenomenal event, and since then, she's become a major collaborator of Spiritism and the Spiritist movement throughout the world, to the point that one of her books, the one that was published by HarperCollins, the one that is entitled Return from Heaven, was published in Spanish first time by the International Spiritist Council. And that was launched last October in Spain in the International Spiritist meeting. Beautiful collaboration. And she's here again with us, collaborate, enlightening our minds and opening the hearts of everyone. So share these news because the time has come. She's going to tell many good, exciting proposals. But why do we reincarnate? Many people ask, why do we reincarnate? Well, if you go to the source of the Spirit's book, in question 167, when visionary Allan Kardec proposed this question to the illuminated spirits, they answered, to expiate and to foster humankind's progress. Without reincarnation, how could there be justice? When we walk around in the world, we see people who are healthy, wealthy, and beautiful, very knowledgeable, skillful, and at the same time, we see people who are impaired, either mentally, spiritually, physically, and we think, why? And we will dedicate this whole show to the memory of Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. He who was this leading force in the research on past lives memories and brought this clear evidence. And as he said, these diathenetic elements that we bring from previous lives. When we talk about diathenetic, we talk about things that go transpose death thanatos, death, so diathenetic. And he says clearly, he states, there are many things that the environmental influences cannot explain. There are other things the genetic input cannot explain. So what else could they be if not coming from reincarnatory features? What are they? It's all about getting to know ourselves. And that's why Kardec Radio is here, to share with you the best about ourselves. The good news, this is a radio station, and our program here in the talk shows, they are here to bring the good news. Because I know, we all know, we are tired of this turning on TVs and radios and people sharing sad news. And we all know, you know people who are good-hearted, who are doing great works. And why don't they get it announced in the news? Because it doesn't make the headlines? What if we try? So here it is. Kardec Radio is doing its part to share the good news, to bring to you these pioneering minds that are transforming the planet Earth into a better planet. Because we all know planet Earth is in this transition. And if you want to get to know more about it, go to KardecRadio.com. And you're going to be able to listen to the on-demand programs and also to the live shows every Saturday at 11 a.m. And if you cannot be there, just go to the website and click. And you can also access it from your iPhone, BlackBerry. All you need to do is to access Kardec Radio, and the instructions will be right there for you on how you can listen to it anywhere and everywhere you are. Back to our theme of today, Reincarnation and You. What do the choices in this life affect the transition to the afterlife and then back into a new reincarnation? Well, if you want to know more, there is a phenomenal book that tells true accounts about it, brought by Allan Kardec in his amazing research, which is Heaven and Hell. In this book's second part, we have several cases of spirits that come through the mediums at the time, and Kardec was the researcher, and he revealed to us what they disclosed, their choices in this life, how they affected in their departure to the spiritual realm, in their experience in their lives in the spiritual realm, and then back into a new reincarnation. Nowadays, many people claim that they are a little bored, especially teenagers. So we have chosen a special chapter on the account of a bored spirit. You want to know what happens if you're bored? Here you are. You're going to get to know the consequences of this endless boredom here in the afterlife and back in future reincarnations. Listen to this and we'll be right back with you.
An excerpt from the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. Part 2, Chapter 7. A Bored Spirit. Bordeaux, 1862. This spirit presented itself spontaneously to the medium, demanding prayers. And Kardec began his questions. What has led you to demand our prayers?
I'm tired of wandering around aimlessly.
Have you been in such a situation for a long time?
About 180 years.
What did you used to do on earth?
Nothing good.
What is your status among other spirits?
I am among the bored ones.
But that does not comprise a category in and of itself.
Amongst us, everything comprises a category. Every sensation finds its similar and sympathetic counterparts band together.
Since you were not condemned to suffering, why have you remained for so long without progressing?
I have been condemned to idleness, which among us is suffering. Anything that is not a joy is suffering.
So have you been forced to remain errant against your will?
There are causes too subtle for your material intelligence.
Oh, try to explain them to me. It will be a beginning for you to become useful.
Since I have no terms for comparison, I couldn't. An extinguished life on earth bequeaths to the spirit who has not profited from it what fire bequeaths to paper that it has consumed. Sparks, which recall what the still compacted ashes used to be and where they came from, that is, the destruction of the paper, These sparks are the remembrance of the earthly ties that bind the spirit until it has dispersed the ashes of its body. Only then does the spirit regain itself as an ethereal essence and desire to begin progressing once again.
What might have caused the boredom you complain about?
The consequences of my existence. Boredom is the child of idleness. I didn't know how to employ the lengthy years I spent on earth, and the consequences have been reflected in this world.
Can't spirits like you, who are a wandering prey to boredom, emerge from such a state if they want to?
No, they cannot always do so because boredom has paralyzed their will. They are suffering the consequences of their existence. They are useless and wanting of initiative and seek no help from each other. They are left to themselves until the weariness of their idle state makes them desire to change it. Then, at the slightest awakening of their will, they find support and good counsel to assist them in their efforts to persevere.
Could you tell me something about your earthly existence?
Alas, very little. You must understand, boredom, uselessness, and idleness result from laziness, which in turn is the mother of ignorance.
But didn't your previous lifetimes enable you to improve?
Yes, all of them, but very slightly, since they were reflections of one another. There is always progress, but it is so imperceptible that we don't even notice it.
While you're waiting for a new existence, would you be willing to come to me more often?
Evoke me. I will be constrained to come. You will render me a service.
Can you explain why your handwriting changes so frequently?
Because you ask a lot of questions. That tires me, and I need help in order to write.
And then the medium's guide explains. It is mental effort which tires him and which obliges us to help him so that he can respond to your questions. He is as idle in the spirit world as he was on the earth. We brought him to you in order to attempt to pull him out of his apathy and boredom, which is true suffering, and sometimes more painful than the acute pain would be because it can prolong itself indefinitely. Can you imagine the torment of the perspective of endless boredom? Most of the spirits of this category look for earthly existence only as a pastime and as a means to break the unbearable monotony of their spirit life. That is why they frequently enter their earthly lives without any defined resolution to foster the good. And this, in turn, obligates them to start all over until finally true progress is felt.
We are going to give a short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring you Carol Bowman with her insights on reincarnation and you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday, live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
And now we return to our program.
So, dear listener, we have here Carol Bowman. She has a lot to share with us. What if, by any chance, you wake up one morning and your 4-year-old child turns to you and says, "You're not my mom, you're not my dad, and actually my mom and my dad are living next door in Washington, D.C., if you're living in Virginia, for example, like ourselves." What do? You just dismiss it, or you work on it? Would you dig deeper? What should we do at this point? This case and many others have happened around the world, even more dramatic than this. And Carol Bowman is the one that has been working on it therapeutically. More than their research, she brings the healing. And this is what we're focusing on in the show today. The healing of the mind, the millennial mind that is coming here. So now we have here with us our dear Carol Bowman. Hi, Carol. Thank you for joining Kardec Radio. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Vanessa. That's the nicest introduction I've ever heard to this one.
Thank you for your generous input. Carol, we are so delighted to have you here because we know the world needs healing. And for many lives, we feel we have been, let's say, in a very popular way, messing up here and there, besides getting some things right. And then we reincarnate and we feel we're troubled. So how did you get yourself into this field of work, reincarnation, past lives regression?
I got into past life regression because I had chronic health problems. I had all kinds of problems with my lungs. I had asthma, bronchitis, pleurisy, and year after year it was getting worse and worse to the point where I was afraid I was going to die. And during the height of my illness, this was in the mid-'80s, when I was in my mid to late 30s, I saw a vision of myself as a man, and he had a different style of dress on. He had like a white nightgown on, and he was lying in bed coughing up blood. And the next thing I saw in my vision was of a funeral procession with horses and people walking beside the horses, and I knew in that moment that I had died of consumption of disease to the lungs, and I saw myself above the scene looking down at what I believed to be my own funeral. But I didn't really know what to do with this information. I thought, well, maybe it's a past life memory, but does that mean I'm supposed to repeat this pattern? Would I die young and leave my children and my husband behind? So as fate would have it, and I think this is all orchestrated, someone told me about someone who was doing past life regression, and I had never heard of it at that point. This was about 1986. And I called this person, made an appointment, and in that 2-hour session, I saw the lifetime in which I died of consumption, and I saw the emotional issues around that lifetime and that death. And I also saw that in my last life, I died in a concentration camp in the gas chambers, and I had lost my family. And during the past life regression, I had quite an emotional catharsis when all the pieces fell into place, and I realized that I had had visions and dreams and spontaneous memories of that World War II lifetime throughout my life, beginning in childhood. And after that one session, after the understanding what had happened, getting the context for that lifetime, both lifetimes, and releasing the feelings around the deaths, there was so much trauma in the second lifetime in World War II because there was grief, there was anger, there was sadness, there was everything you can imagine in such a horrendous life. After I had an emotional release and processed it, I got better. In fact, my lungs improved so much that my medical doctor ended up doing a past life regression with the therapist that I initially went to. And that's pretty good evidence that something happened. But in that moment, too, I realized that was the most profound experience I had ever had, and I wanted to learn how to do it. So that my journey began then with past life regression therapy. And I sought some of the experts in the field in the 80s to train with, and I went back to graduate school and got my master's. A year after I had my first regression, my 5-year-old son, Chase, started becoming terrified of loud booming sounds. And this happened at a 4th of July fireworks display, which is Independence Day in the United States. And I thought it was very out of character for my son. And when that therapist who had initially worked with me came to visit us, this was a year after I had done my regression, I happened to mention Chase's phobia to him. And I thought, being a hypnotherapist, he could give him some post-hypnotic suggestion to relieve or allay his fear. And what happened was, when he asked Chase what he was afraid of when he heard the loud booming sounds, he recalled in vivid detail his life as an American Civil War soldier, a black soldier. He's white in this lifetime. And there were issues of sadness about leaving his wife and family, which, believe me, it was very shocking to hear your 5-year-old talking about. And eventually, over the course of a year and a half, the memory kept coming up spontaneously, triggered by the war, the first war in Iraq, the American war in Iraq. And he, over a year and a half, he processed the whole experience. He went through his death experience. He saw himself out of the body, looking down at the battlefield, and he got the big lessons from that lifetime about war not being a good thing. He said he was glad he missed another war. He came to a more peaceful time, and he said, and this is by the time he finally resolved it and went through his death spontaneously. He said, everyone experiences war. It teaches you how other people feel. He said, I never want to experience that again. And this is coming from a 7-year-old, and my interpretation was, this is how he learned compassion. There are many lives of suffering that we endure, and it's all for learning. So after Chase had his experience, I became intensely curious as to whether other children had these memories too, and if they had healings from remembering. And in Chase's case, after his first session when he was 5, when he started remembering the life of the soldier, his phobia of loud sounds went away, and so did a chronic eczema on his wrist where he said he was shot in that battle. So he had not only an emotional healing but a physical healing from remembering. So when I discovered Ian Stevenson's work, I was delighted that someone had researched children's spontaneous memories, but Stevenson really didn't mention any kind of healing. And after my first book was published, I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Stevenson and working with him on several of my cases that I offered to him to investigate so I could see how he worked. And I brought that up with him, why did you never mention healing in all of these cases? And he said, because you can't prove it. But I had seen it with my own eyes, and actually both my children, whose stories are in my first book. So I realized Dr. Stevenson provided an incredible foundation for the validity of past life memories in children. And I had an experience as an adult of having a healing by remembering my past life. So I kind of combined what I learned from Dr. Stevenson, from my own children, from my own experience, and I could see that children, as these memories come up spontaneously in very young children, usually before the age of 5, that these are opportunities for the soul to heal. And that's where I put my energy. That's where my work differs from Dr. Stevenson's and most people who are just documenting the cases and looking for evidence that these memories are real, which is very important for people to realize so they can at least be open to the possibility of reincarnation. But I want to take it in the direction that these memories can heal. And usually what we remember as adults, or as children especially, are that what sticks with us are the memories of past life trauma. So that's what we need to heal. And it works very much like trauma we experience in this life. It's as if the past life trauma carries over into this life, and through our behaviors, through our attitudes, through sometimes the physical body, through our emotions, certainly. And if we can go back and process the past life story, we can release the energy around the trauma, and that releases that part of our soul that's stuck in the past life trauma. And it's the same for children as it is for adults. The difference with children is these memories usually come up spontaneously when they're very young. And if we listen to them, acknowledge these memories as they're coming up, it's an opportunity for their souls to let go of the baggage they're carrying into this life so they have more energy to live more fully. And that's what we're here to do, to live more fully with more awareness without some of the emotional, even physical baggage from previous lives.
And Carol, when you were talking about memories of previous lives, we agree with you that the healing is of the essence here. Otherwise, yes. Because many people, they say, I just want to remember my previous life. But then we say, there are precautions here. You need to be aware of the setbacks because, yes, you need to work on it, but when should you work on it? And I would share just a passage, an excerpt when we talk about forgetfulness of the past. Mm-hmm. Though in Spiritism, we understand that reincarnation is just a law of life. It belongs, as Kardec stated, like law of reincarnation. It talks about the fact that what for any cause that exists, there is an effect. There is a book by Andrea Lewis, the spirit doctor through Chico Xavier, The Amazing Medium. The title is Action and Reaction. It talks about previous lives, cases in which people who behaved this way, they faced another struggle, and they had the plan for the healing, as you're saying. But in question 394 of the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec brings a question, then the Spirit answer, and he makes a comment. He says, in the forgetfulness of the past existences, especially when they were painful, is there not something providential where the divine wisdom is revealed? It is on the more highly evolved worlds, when the memory of unhappy lives is nothing more than a bad dream, that the memory of such lives resurfaces. On less evolved worlds, however, would present misfortunes not be increased by the memory of everything that had been endured in the past. Therefore, we conclude that everything that God has made is well made, and that it is not our place to criticize the divine works and say how God ought to have regulated the universe. The remembrance of our former personalities would entail serious inconveniences. In certain cases, it would cause us a great deal of humiliation. In others, it would exalt our pride and so hinder our free will. Okay, the comment continues. That doesn't mean, this is just an excerpt specifically about forgetfulness. It doesn't mean that we should block, we shouldn't work, because in Spiritism we understand that the foundation brings to the reasoning that if they come spontaneously, as you're saying, there is a reason. So would you say that there are precautions and there are ways in which we should be careful about engaging into previous lives' contents?
From my experience, Vanessa, especially, let's start with the children's memories, because they do come up spontaneously. And if I remember the statistics correctly from Dr. Stevenson, he found that more than half the children who had spontaneous memories, and we're talking about 2, 3, and 4-year-olds mostly, the filters are down for whatever reason. The memories of the previous lives are coming up, and what he found is more than half of them remember their deaths. And about 75% of these deaths that are remembered are traumatic deaths. So what we've learned through Dr. Stevenson's work, and I've seen the same thing with hundreds of cases that I've seen in the past 22 years since my son had his memory, that what appears to come up most frequently in children are memories of traumatic deaths. But if a pleasant memory came up, if a little child said, oh, when I was big before I had horses, we probably wouldn't even give it a second thought. You know, we would just overlook that as, oh, that's a pleasant little fantasy. But the things that we do recognize are when children, especially very young children, start talking about when I was big before and I died, the man shot me in the face. And then a child has some unusual birthmark on their face. When these traumatic memories are coming up naturally, they can be very troubling for young children. And children may have phobias related to the way they died. For instance, if they were in a car accident, they might be terrified of sitting in a car and driving in a car in this life. So I think it's a call to action. I think that we have to acknowledge these memories and help, if we can, by allowing the children to talk about these memories and explaining to them that that's something that happened before. They're now in a new life and a new body. It can diffuse the energy around the trauma so they can let go of it. But they come in, many children come in with these traumatic memories, and I think it's more harmful to not acknowledge them, because I have seen from my work with adults, when I take a detailed history with the adults, a lot of the issues from past lives start surfacing early in life, in childhood, through the family of origin, through our experiences early in life. So the patterns are there when we come into this life. And I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to access them, to release them. There's no point in carrying them. And, people come to me as adults, and they say, ever since I was 5 years old, I've been terrified of water, for example. That's a pretty common phobia. Mm-hmm. And I've never been able to swim. I can't go into a pool. And then in one session, when they access the past life memory, and usually with adults you do it through hypnosis, although it can come up, the memories can come up spontaneously, triggered by different things or through meditation. When you go back to the original trauma and they release it, they're free. Mm-hmm. So I think, I have kind of a different view on that, because why would these memories push up so strongly in childhood? I feel it's an opportunity to heal the soul, and I think that's what we're here to do. Mm-hmm. And,
but
there's
you
so
wouldn't
many
recommend, sorry to interrupt you, but you wouldn't recommend, though, that people who don't have these spontaneous memories, or who are not at some point stuck in their lives, to engage into making efforts to remember previous lives, would you?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to understand is that past life memories show themselves in our present personalities. Like you said in your introduction, we're more than our heredity, more than our environmental influences. There is that third stream of past lives that feed into our present personalities. And what I found, especially in the adult work, with the children, it comes up spontaneously. With the adults, I work with people who have been in therapy for 30 years. This is not unusual in the United States. It's kind of shocking. But, for example, I worked with a woman who had agoraphobia. She was terrified to leave her house. She was 50 years old. She had a family. She couldn't travel more than about 2 miles from her house. And she was desperate. She had been to psychiatrists, psychologists. She had been on drugs for 40 years. This started at age 10, and it was triggered by the death of her father. And she was desperate to find answers. Why couldn't she get over this? In one session, we saw that she had been a father in a previous life, a man in some environment where there was desert, maybe northern Africa. We didn't identify where she was. And her young son was sick. And everyone in the village advised her, this man, not to go out because there was a storm coming, but he felt he should go out and help his son by getting some medicine in a neighboring community. He went out. He was caught in a windstorm, and he lost his way, and he died. And as he was dying, he said, I never should have left home. And in that moment, this woman realized that she was still carrying the belief from the previous life, and she acted on it. She was afraid to leave her home. And that she called me after this session. Actually, she called me a few years after. It was just one session. I had driven to her house, which was an hour away because she couldn't leave her house to do the regression. And she said it changed her life. She was able to finally go out of her house. She went into Philadelphia. She was able to go to graduate school. She's now a therapist. And she said it changed her life. It freed her soul. So I would have to say that absolutely, it's not for entertainment. This is real therapy. This is the deepest kind of therapy because it's working on a soul level. So when people call me, if they say they're just curious about past lives, I make them go to a deeper level. Well, what are the issues in your life? Have you ever done therapy? Is there any trauma in your life? Why do you want to do this? What do you want to explore? And if they don't have a good reason, a deep therapeutic reason to do this, I won't do a regression. But if they say, I've been in therapy for 20 years and I just can't get through this issue, it's been with me my whole life, then after talking to them for a short time, I can pretty much feel, I'm slightly intuitive too, I can sense that we're dealing with past life issues. And if one session can resolve that issue so these people can live with more energy, more freedom, feel that part of their soul is healed, I'd have to say it's a good thing. So I don't maybe from a 19th century perspective, this, it may not have been a good thing to hypnotize people to past lives. But as we're evolving, I see that this is part of the overall healing of our souls and hence the planet. So, I think it's evolutionary. I see more and more children having these memories, more coming to my attention because of Dr. Stevenson's work, because of my books, because of I have a past life forum where people around the world can post their cases of children's past lives. I think it's just the mass consciousness is changing. So these memories are not only found in India or places where they believe in this, or Brazil, but in the United States, in the West, and in Europe, people are becoming more aware of this, so they're listening to children differently. They're looking at their own lives and their own issues differently. They're wondering, could this be from a previous life? And many times it is.
Exactly.
Especially if they've... Yeah, so I think it all works together. I don't think it can be harmful if you work with a therapist who has absolutely no idea what they're doing, or you're doing it just on a whim or for entertainment. I think that's wrong. It's not for entertainment.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal. In the Spiritist teachings, we're all pro evaluating the tendencies of the past and acknowledging them and working on them if they surface spontaneously, if there is any trauma, if you're stuck in life. So what you say really matches so much this line of thought, but we just want the Kardec radio listener to know that the show is not to tell you, go to the next past life regression therapist and do it just because you have lived many lives. So we are talking about, as you said, I love the expression you said, call into action. So when is there a way for people to not take for granted these flashbacks, and especially when it comes to change the dynamics of our relationships to a point that marriages fall apart or family relationships in general are harmed, especially for parents who see their children behaving in a specific way? When do you think they should really take action and not simply say, oh, that's something from the past and that's it? Is there a way for them to be more fully aware and take action?
If the child appears to be troubled by the past life memory, or they have unusual behaviors, phobias, for example, phobias by definition are unexplained fears. If a child has a perfectly healthy, normal childhood with supportive, loving parents and there's no trauma, and the child is particularly fearful or anxious, and they say something about a previous life, then it's totally appropriate to ask open-ended questions and keep them talking about the previous life. I do not suggest past life therapy for children. I do not suggest hypnotizing children. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if the memory comes up spontaneously, if they talk about when they died before and they're very sad about missing their wife and family, a very simple intervention is appropriate, like explaining to them that, yes, it was very sad what happened, but that's now over and they're in a new life. That could be sufficient to help them, because when we're 2, 3, or 4 years old, we're still in this continuum of consciousness from the past life. A lot of times young children don't know that they've made a transition from a previous life into another body, which sounds kind of amazing, but it's true. The memories are so strong that they don't know that it's another lifetime. They think it's something that's still happening to them. And that's where I think it's necessary to clarify to them that was something that happened before when they were in another body. And it can work very effectively. I've seen it happen in many cases, reported back to me from parents.
When there is problem, when there's trouble, when it's going to change the course of events in our life. So when you talk about trauma, it reminds me of something that when I was in December 2007 visiting Divaldo Franco at the Mansion of the Way in Brazil, I had a chance to meet this Brazilian spiritist professor who is specialist in some psychological features of the human mind, and she was sharing, Vanessa, I realized that trauma is a byproduct of a predisposition from a previous life and the environmental issues of this reincarnation. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, look, if a mother has two children and she kind of behaves almost like same way. We always know it's not the same way, but let's say the dynamics of education are pretty similar. And one of them may develop a trauma by the way in which the mother proposes to, the schedule of children, thinking that she's repressing them, etc. And the other one may feel it's like, it doesn't develop any time of stress or trauma, and she says, that outcome is a byproduct of predisposition that is very likely between that child and their mother, if not to the style of behavior, of that type of behavior that is displayed by that person, in this case the mother. What do you think about this? Does it make sense?
Yeah, and I would say what I found in working with the children and the adults is that we come in with these karmic patterns. All of us do. Some are positive. We acquire wisdom and talents, abilities in previous lives, and that's not troublesome at all. I mean, we just take that for granted. That's our personalities, or, we have special talents. But sometimes we come in as children and later as adults, and like you describe a situation where the conditions are the same for siblings, but one of them has a very strong fear, for example, that's incongruous with the family. However, they might have an experience when they're little. Someone might say something to them. They might see something, or the conditions in their environment can trigger the past life pattern that's already there. So they come in with this propensity or this inclination. I forget which word you used, but it's almost like the seed is there. The seed from previous lives is there, and it's germinated through experience, through environment, and then it becomes an activated pattern, and that's what we're working on. We come in with this unfinished business. It could be we treated someone very unfairly in the past. We could come back with those individuals again. In fact, that group reincarnation is very significant because we do come back with the same souls. Not always, but probably often. So, for example, if that one child has a very difficult relationship with the mother and the other child doesn't, it could be that there were some issues in a previous life between those two souls that were unresolved, and they've come back to work on it. And I've seen this again and again. In my book, Return from Heaven, I have 2 cases of abusive mothers who came back as their daughter's children. And once the mothers figured out that their mothers, this is a little complicated, that the mothers who died are back as their children and they have difficult relationships with them, they realized that's an opportunity for them to be a better parent and heal the relationship. And they work very hard at doing that because they realize that's why the reincarnation occurred, to work through the difficulties that they had before. So it could be, a specific relationship with that soul, or it could be that the present mother, in the case you described, reminded the child of a previous experience, or something else triggered that child, or just the tendency was there and it just came out because it's there.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And Carol, there's so much still to ask you. We're going to give a short break and be right back because we have one caller to talk to you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritist.net. spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is It is Good to Be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.mvscenter.org. That is www.mvscenter.org.
Carol Bowman is here with us. She is this internationally known author and therapist, the leading force on children's past lives memories, especially in the therapeutic features, the healing that needs to come from it, beyond research. And she's here with us, and we are going to bring her in to answer the question of one of the callers. We have here Alba Morales from Maryland. Hi, Alba. Thank you for joining Kardec Radio.
Thank you for the opportunity of asking this question. Actually, I was thinking about new parents or parents-to-be. How can they be prepared for the new life that they are about to receive, knowing that is a spirit with a lot of experiences? If my question is more directed in the line of education, how can we parents be ready, be prepared for these millennium souls that are coming to planet Earth? We are aware we need to work out in relationships, but also as a parents we need tools, we need resources to better receive these new spirits that are reincarnated.
Well, I think that a spiritist parent would be more qualified to deal with some of these issues than a lot of parents who aren't aware of the possibility of reincarnation. Because when a child is born, you have to realize they're coming in with their own experiences, that they're souls who have had prior experiences. They're not just our little puppets, or I don't know what people think children are, or babies, but there's so much more than what we tend to think of, because we are souls. And I think it's really important to know that they're here, they're coming back. These souls are coming back to be with us for different purposes. It could be for mutual learning. It could be we have to help them, or they want to help us. And I think we just have to be open to that. And if they start giving any indications of past lives, as I've been talking about, if they're troubled, we need to talk to them as souls and help them become more grounded in the present and help them live better lives. I think I don't think spiritists have as much difficulty with that as maybe parents who aren't aware of the possibility of reincarnation.
Yeah, and Alba, do you think you wanted to know more from a psychological perspective, like
yes.
mostly
yes.
if people have problems?
Yes.
Is that what you
yes.
mean?
Yes.
Well, I think, as I said before, if the problems seem to be incongruous with the child's environment, if it's a stable environment and they have some fear, like separation anxiety, and you're a stay-at-home mother and there's no reason at all for this child to have separation anxiety, I think that's a clue. There's a reason why they don't want you to go out of their sight. So, I think, like I said, I don't recommend probing too much or doing any kind of past life therapy with young children, but you can ask questions. What are you afraid of? I'll always be here, and recognize that it might be an issue from a previous life, that it has nothing to do with your parenting skills or the conditions of this life, that it is a tendency that they have brought with them from a previous life. And a lot of times I think there is a certain level of healing that it can occur almost telepathically. If you're aware of this other level of consciousness, I think you can be a better parent usually. Just the child feels freer to express him or herself. And, if they see spirits or if they have past life memories, I think a spiritist parent would recognize that and nurture that rather than dismiss it. Like a lot of people are afraid of it because they've been taught to be afraid of it. So I really can't address specific psychological issues unless you give me a concrete example. But the separation anxiety is a pretty common one, and a lot of times that does go back to past life experience where they were abandoned in a past life, or someone left them, or they died alone, and they're still re-experiencing that to some degree.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Alba, for joining us and for bringing that reflection to us as well. Okay, so we now have another friend of ours who is here, Kirsten DeMello, and she is in the Maryland area as well, and she's joining us to ask a question to Carol. Hi, Kirsten. Thank you for joining Kardec Radio.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, Mrs. Bowman, and hi, Vanessa. It's really a pleasure to listen to you guys and to hear today's show. It's really enlightening. I'm really glad that these types of things are going on. But I do have a question for you, Ms. Bowman, about how do you deal with parents who have children who are having these past life memories, yet the parents, or what is your recommendation, how you deal with parents who see their children having these incidences and occurrences with their children, that they're having these memories and it's quite clear, but the parents are very against it. They don't want to accept it, yet the child is obviously having issues with it, and the parents want to address it, yet they don't want to acknowledge the past life. They want it to be something else. Have you ever experienced anything like that before, or how would you address it if it did happen?
I actually, by the time people get to me, they've acknowledged that it's probably a past life experience. They're reluctant to come to that conclusion. And it's not the first conclusion Western parents or, in non-believing cultures come to. But I think it has to be addressed on that level, or just allow the child to express what they need to express. You don't have to call it anything, but just don't dismiss it or shut the child down. I think that's the most important thing. Just approach it with an open mind and ask questions. And, if the parent is aware enough, then they will say the right things to help the child. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I do have cases where, in some cases, family members absolutely do not want to believe that this is reincarnation, but maybe one of the parents does. So if that parent can talk very directly to the child, that's good enough. That can help the child. But if the parents don't believe in this at all, I think they're missing an incredible opportunity, and it's unfortunate. And I think, I'm hoping that more people become aware of this, so that if it does come up, they don't reject it out of hand, that they encourage the child to talk about it and allow them to express whatever emotions they need to, and just reassure them that the child is now safe, or they have enough to eat, or they're now protected, or I will never leave you, whatever they need as assurances as it relates to the memory that's coming up. So that's a tough one. if people are not open to this, they miss a lot of opportunities, and I know it happens
Right.
a lot.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. So I think through my books, through spiritists, through anyone who's writing books about reincarnation and past lives, I think that's doing a lot to educate people. But even with that, I know a lot of people are still surprised that children can have these memories. I'm working hard, and I know Vanessa and her organization and all the spiritists are working hard to correct this. But in American culture, it's still tough to get through to some people, and we never will.
Kirsten, would you like to ask any other thing to Carol or make a comment?
Actually, I would if there's time. I actually was kind of curious, Ms. Bowman, judging by what you said, have you ever recommended any type of spiritist literature to any of the parents that you've come across, or do you generally just use the overall literature, the research that you've done to help soothe parents that are still sort of bothered or even just trying to figure out what's really going on?
I try to keep it in very simple terms to make it very accessible to parents who are unfamiliar with this. And I remember in writing my first book, my husband who helped me and I would say, we have to remember we're writing for that mother in Iowa who has no idea that this can happen. So it was, I had a very friendly tone, and I made sure that people knew that I was a mother who had no idea this could happen, which was true. And then when it happened to me, I sought answers, and I laid out the first book in such a way that it was very, for lack of a better term, user-friendly. And this is something natural that happens. It's nothing to be afraid of. And I just try to keep it in very simple terms that people will understand. I don't want to get into doctrine about reincarnation or even philosophy about reincarnation. I just say children have past life memories because we're souls and we have these other experiences. And this is how you talk to a child. Use very simple language. So I try to make it very practical. I'm trying to avoid philosophy or doctrine or anything that has religious connotations for people, because that scares them away, I think, in the United States especially, because most people are conditioned here to believe that this is not true, and if they have a very Christian background, for example, they've been taught that this is really evil, whatever nonsense they've been taught. So it's really hard for them. I'm not trying to impose any worldview. I'm just saying, look, this, like Vanessa said, this is a natural phenomenon. It's a natural process. Probably we all experience it, and I just try to make it sound as normal as possible and keep my comments at a minimum, without getting into a lot of spirituality. Just, here's a practical approach. Here's what you can do with your child. I'm a mother. I did it, and it worked, and my child was better. Keep it as simple as possible. Yeah. So that's been my approach. I want to keep it normal. This is very natural and normal, and it can happen to anyone, and there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, that's why we say reincarnation is like gravity. It's inevitable, and it's there. So you better know of it so you don't hurt yourself, meaning to watch out. Right, Kirsten? So thank you also for being with us, Kirsten. Thank you for bringing these questions too. Carol, you talked about karma, previous lives experiences. Do you think through your experience with your patients and the cases you've been through that there is what we call like a reincarnatory plan for people?
Yes.
How so?
Yes. Well, I think what I've learned through thinking about this for years and years is that once the past life story is known, it's easier to see what the pattern is or why we come into this life with certain parents or with certain tendencies. And what I've learned is that we have an experience in a previous life. Say we really feel we messed up. We did, for example, we were a German officer in World War II who ordered the death of many innocent people. There's no way to justify that. However, if we have a change of heart in that life, then we die with more awareness, which is a good thing. But what I've learned is, if you have a life like that, if you do something, you're not an evil person, but you do evil things, and I think we've all done that at some point along the line. We've made mistakes. I think when we die, we have that awareness. We can see what we did, and we can evaluate it. I think there is some moral principle behind the universe. It's not just random, and it's not dark. It's all for learning and purpose and growing, as you said. So after we die, we might realize, oh, that was really not the way to go. And I think at that level, I think we have guides. I think we have teachers in the spirit world who assist us in planning our future lives. So if we did something really horrendous in a past life, there are probably many, many creative ways to balance that, to learn. If we're really not learning very quickly, we might have to experience a similar kind of suffering to understand what kind of actions we caused. Maybe if we're a little more enlightened, if we die realizing before we die, oh, that was terrible, I shouldn't have done that, that was not the way to go, we might come back and agree to be a surgeon and help people heal rather than kill them. Mm-hmm. So I think, there are endless possibilities of working out these lessons that we need to learn, but it has to be done in the body. So I think not everything is mitigated in the afterlife when we get all this knowledge. We have to come back and kind of pick up where we left off in some ways and progress and learn. And I think it's a very creative process. I think it's so multidimensional that we can't even imagine how all these threads connect, when we need to meet the right person at the right time. A lot of things are predetermined. Mm-hmm. But we do have free will, and we can choose to grow and learn, or we can stay stuck in our old patterns, like you said. It's about learning. It's about changing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it reminds me of these cases also when people talk about learning, more difficult problems in families. For example, many people say that, for example, you're talking about creativity, and it's the power of co-creation within ourselves, right. Actually. So right. People who are adopted, for example, and sometimes they feel they are more connected to their adopted children or to their adopted parents than even the biological ones.
Right. I know of cases such as that. I have very dear friends who adopted children, and the strange thing is these children look like the parents, and they couldn't be a better match. And the mother couldn't have children in this life, and they came through a different route. Maybe there was something everyone had to learn from this experience, but the plan was for them to be together, and they were, and it's like I don't see that quality of relationship in a lot of families that this family has. Mm-hmm. So, for whatever reason, we don't know the reasons necessarily, but yes, there is a plan. This is not random.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And when you talk about these cases, and you talked about intuition, that there is, because some people, they claim that, how do I know I lived previous lives if I don't know what I've done, what I've been? How can I actually know what is my reincarnatory plan? So do you think there are mechanisms like intuition that would guide you through, like, little crumbs of tips and hints here and there in our pathway, telling us, look, you display this way more easily, this feature of yourself, because you've done it in the past, like good things as well. Do you think intuition is a part of it?
Absolutely. Because we know, for example, in my own case, when I did my first past life regression, I had never really found what my work was. I thought, oh, maybe I'm just here to have 2 children and that's it. But it was not. I knew there was something more. And as soon as I did that first past life regression, I knew that's what I was supposed to do. You just know it. And then, although you still have to work at it, think doors open. And I think it's that way. I think there are clues along the way. And certainly if we're drawn to certain things, those are clues. Mm-hmm. If we're born and, we have a fascination with science and then we end up getting a scholarship to medical school, clearly that's a life path. The doors open. So it's definitely the positive stuff comes through too. Mm-hmm. Or you just have a very strong feeling and this happens all the time when I talk to clients. Well, ever since the age of 4, I wanted to be a policeman. And, mm-hmm. That's the path they follow. There's usually some past life precedent too. Maybe they were, a good soldier in the past and, they want to continue that tradition. So it doesn't have to be all about trauma and negative things. And as well as I, the synchronicities happen mm-hmm. When we're on our paths. Doors open and we're given clues if we're aware, if we're looking.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting when you talk about synchronicity and using intuition as well as means and ways mm-hmm. to, it's amazing the story of yourself, when you experience it in yourself and then your child,
yeah.
and the way in which you immerse yourself into this, it must be a combination of your free will and determination of a plan before you're reincarnated, because having this mission in your hand, there must be a plan around it for it to unfold this way and with so much strength as well, right? Do you feel that way as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and believe me, I had my obstacles too, mm-hmm. obstacles to surmount to do this, but it was the only thing that I felt that I wanted to do. There was such a desire, there was such a passion for it that I tried to do other things to make money, to try to support myself, but it didn't work out. I just kept coming back to this, and fortunately I have a supportive husband who encouraged me, and he jokes with me that I'm totally unemployable, that I have to continue doing what I'm doing. But, it's very clear to me that this is what I'm here to do. And I always thank my son for handing me my life's work, too, because it was through him that this work came to me. So I think our destinies were entwined in that way, for just things to happen when they happened, as they happened. And I think once you're on your path, it's amazing what will open up, the people that will come along and say the right thing at the right time or give you a helping hand. It's all there. And I think we all have different reasons for being here. And I think for those of us who can find work that is so meaningful and satisfying, it's such a blessing. I feel so fortunate to be able to do this because I am unemployable, by the way.
That's so funny.
I'd be lost in the world without this.
Temporarily, because it seems like the world is changing, right? People are I remember last week talking to Jeff Radiger, and he who is this psychiatrist at Harvard University, and I asked him, since you've been to the Oprah show, I bet you've been crucified by scientists and colleagues. And he said, to my surprise, I've been supported all along. And he said, I feel times are changing and people are really thirsty for these things. So it feels like the time is right. Do you feel like it's finally coming, Carol?
Absolutely. And as I was telling you in private before, I'm working with a major Hollywood filmmaker now who wants to do a film on reincarnation. I can't mention who it is, mm-hmm. but if it's a good script, if it goes well, this could be phenomenal in opening up people's eyes to reincarnation. So it's really interesting that he made another movie that was very popular. When I saw the movie about 12 years ago, I imagined him doing this movie, and I imagined myself sitting in a meeting with him, advising him, doing consulting, and it has come to pass. So I think, And I don't get, when I talk about intuition, there are very few things that are very clear to me, but everything about my work is, the key points have been very clear all along, and they've come to pass. So that tells me that it's not me, that there are certain things that are kind of ordained or planned or fated, and we just, if we work hard and we keep following that direction, they will happen, which is probably another conversation, but I really believe that. And I think that that's part of the plan for me when I came in, was to do this work, and I think we all have plans for our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about plan, I remember in 2009 when this voice, as usually, the first 3 Spiritist Symposium, when I heard the first time in 2006, November, this voice saying, Vanessa, we need to put together a Spiritist meeting, a national meeting, all in English, because usually it's done like in Portuguese with translation, speakers coming from Brazil. And the voice said, no, we need to take the speakers from within the United States and make it all in English form without translations whatsoever. And we started it in Baltimore, Maryland, 2007. 2008, we were at the New York location right in front of the Central Park. And then 2009, this phenomenal location that is so historical, the Fenway Hall. And when it said, Vanessa, contact Carol Bowman, I'm like, really? It makes sense to me because it was all about reincarnation. And I was like, maybe she's not going to come. Vanessa, just do what you have to do. And then I remember emailing you and we talking on the phone and you joined us. It was such a phenomenal event, and having you opening it, people enjoyed so much. And since then you've been collaborating with the Spiritist community, internationally speaking. How has it been for you, talking about plan and a major plan that is beyond ourselves?
It's been wonderful. After my experience in Boston, I went home and told my husband I had never had that kind of energy flowing in the room, where it was not only a receptive audience, but a very savvy audience where, people knew what I was talking about for a change. And everyone is educated there to, even beyond what I know from the Kardec material. And when my husband joined me in Valencia, when was that, 2010? Was that last year?
Yeah, October 2010.
In October. Yeah, he could see firsthand what I was talking about. The people were just so receptive and warm, and I've told my friends when I got back, I've never gotten so many hugs in my life. No, I've never had so many people want to take my picture and hug me in my life, and that said a lot about the Spiritist community. And I actually have quite a few Brazilian past life regression clients who are very well versed in Spiritism. In fact, one from Florida who knew you, Vanessa. So it's been a real blessing to me to be a part of your group and have the opportunity to express myself to such a receptive audience. It's great. And I feel like I don't have to explain everything. Everybody's on the same page.
But you have added so much, I have to say this, because coming from your background, and although you say like we Spiritists know of reincarnation and we would more easily, connect the dots when it's happening in our own lives, I tell you, it's funny that sometimes we may know of things and may not really apply to ourselves or more easily bridge in. And for example, when doctors know or they know that there is the harm of smoking and they're smokers. Like, how can that be possible? Like the paradox of it. So sometimes, to tell you the truth, it happens in our lives that we Spiritists may seem to know of these things, but when we needed to really connect the dots in our personal lives, it may be a little trickier. It's just probably a phenomenon of human nature that when it comes to our own feelings, it takes a little more. So having you there, sharing these real cases and bringing the therapeutic features and the healing aspects of it really helps us go back to ourselves and bring ourselves to our own reality. you know?
Great. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Well, it works the same way with people from India. I've met with groups of very highly educated Indians who live in the United States now, and they say they're immersed in reincarnation. They grew up in it, you know, and they're intellectuals. They've read the philosophy, the Vedic philosophy, but they never understood the practical applications. I think that's what you're saying. It's the same kind of thing, where it becomes very personal, and it applies to us personally in our own lives and our own psychological issues, our own emotional issues. Mm-hmm. So it brings it home, in a sense. It brings it back to personal growth, too.
Exactly. So it's all about this feeling that we have to work on ourselves. It's not about knowing it, because I feel like sometimes we may know it, but one thing is to know, other thing is to experience, right? Absolutely. There's a difference there.
Talking about having a baby and actually going through the process of childbirth. You can talk about the pain or the sensations, but when you go through it, it's a whole different thing.
Yes, for sure. And Carol, now we're about to wrap up the show, unfortunately, but besides being very grateful to your presence and your time, would like to ask you if you have, in regard to reincarnation and the healing that comes when memories come to surface in our lives, what would be your final comments just for the show with the Kardec radio listeners?
I would say just look within and understand that a lot of our feelings, a lot of our attitudes, many aspects of our personalities do come from previous lives. And sometimes by going back to the source, to the past life story, we can get deeper understanding and healing.
Exactly.
That's
so,
it.
And Carol, we want to hear more from you. We'll be tracking the progress of your works there, and we want, in the name of the Kardec Radio audience, to thank you so much for being here with us and bringing this news, the good news of many things, healing tools that we can use and boost our lives to a better level. Thank you so much for being with us.
Again, thank you, Vanessa, for everything you've done. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. So, dear Kardec Radio listener, there is so much out there. Go to the Spirit's book. There are many chapters there, especially one about the return to corporeal life. Allan Kardec then, in question 205, asked the spirits whether or not reincarnations destroy family ties. How many people ask those very same questions, and they actually avoid or deny the fact that reincarnation exists, or even thinking about it, because they are afraid that the ties of affection that they have with the people in their lives are going to be destroyed. And the answer of the spirits brings a lot of relief, because it says instead of destroying them, it extends them. Since kinships may be based on previous affections, the ties that unite members of the same family are less precarious. Moreover, reincarnation expands the duties of fraternity, because your neighbor or your servant may be a spirit who was formerly related to you by blood. The Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, as said by one of our mentors, Joseph, can be considered the manual of the human soul, or the constitution of our souls as spirits, because there we find the laws, the dynamics of ourselves. Go read that book. It's so simple, at the same time so deep, because it gives us the rules of the games of our mind. It gives us tips and hints about how we can live a better life when we need to strive to be happy. You know, Joana de Angelis said to Divaldo Franco, it's not about having the right to be happy. It's about this really feel that if we are not happy, people won't be happy either, because we are interdependent. So let us strive for achieving this happiness for the sake of everyone, not only of ourselves. And if you really need to read more cases about it, Carol Bowman has amazing books in which you can dig deeper about these real accounts and how healing can take place. And in the Spiritist literature, we have the book The Messengers by Andrea Lewis. You can find it at ediceiofamerica.com or at amazon.com. They are also available, these books, on ebook format. And we are here to join forces with you, dear listener, and make your life easier, make your life better and happier. Because if you're happy, the world is rejoicing with you. Share this news with everyone, and next week we'll be here with a new show. It's about the science of forgiveness. And who is going to be here with us? Our dear Lydia Temoshuk from the University of Maryland. She's going to be with us, sharing the good news that if you make efforts to forgive, you're going to be healthier. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.